We are proud members of the Spy Podcast Network. Find out more at www.spypodcasts.com.
Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we're here to continue our coverage of Casino Royale 1967. We are joined by Jacqueline Bisset, who of course stars in the film as part of Le Chiffre's harem in the background, but later on in the film as Miss Goodthighs, a Smersh assassin out to take out James Bond 007. And I mean, it's a great interview, and we are so happy that Jacqueline took the time to speak to us.
Yeah, this was a huge honor. I mean, I'd watched her in so many movies over the years, movies like Airport, Bullitt, and we do talk to her about those films as well. So this is just a really exciting interview for us.
Yeah, we love doing these SpyMaster interviews to give you a little bit more perspective on the film apart from our opinions. So I think without further ado, holder of the French Legion of Honor, movie star extraordinaire, Jacqueline Bisset. Cam, roll the interview. And joining us now on the show to talk about this week's film, Casino Royale, it is, of course, Jacqueline Bisset. Hello, Jacqueline. How are you doing?
Hello. Hello.
Well, thanks for joining us on the show. We've got a lot to talk about when it comes to Casino Royale, but it's great to speak to someone who's been actually worked on the film. So the first question we have for you is, how did you get involved with the project?
Well, I have no idea. You never know how you get cast, but I was a young beginner sort of actress, and I was, I can't remember if I auditioned for it. I think I probably did audition. I was told I would be playing two parts. One with Peter Sellers, and another one I was going to be one of Orson Welles's henchwomen. So it was hard to spot me, but there was actually two different characters and two different hairdos, and it was all rather vague. I was extremely happy to be working. Me and about 10 other women, young women who were employed during a period of time, were all very happy to be on it. I actually had a part, whereas most of the girls didn't have a part. We had to hang around, you know. It was all it was quite rather fun.
I'm really curious, the Bond movies are obviously a huge deal at this point in time. Was this project, Casino Royale, viewed as kind of a hot project to be on?
I have no idea. I didn't know much about anything in the business at all. I was very green. And what had I done at this point? Which was first? I'd been on the Polanski movie, Cul-de-sac, and I'd been on another. I was an extra in something. The Knack, I'd done The Knack, which was basically an extra part. And what else had I done? Two for the Road. I'm not sure if this was before or after. I think this was before Two for the Road. So I was just enjoying the game, just happy to be on a set and see what was happening. And once the names of people like Orson Welles and Peter Sellers were illustrious, David Niven, and very illustrious names, one had no idea how one was going to fit in.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned the two roles. It's one of the questions I had written down, because some of the research I've done, and of course you were there, so is that you did the role with Orson as part of his assassins in the background, and then they asked you to do Miss Goodthighs after that. But it sounds like you were sort of pitched the two at the start.
Well, I can't remember if they were pitched two, but I was aware that I was going to be in two different outfits, kind of thing. I didn't really understand how they were going to do that, but you hardly see me as one of his henchmen, but I did henchwomen, not henchmen, henchwomen, and so it was non-existent role. It was just visual, but I didn't have any words. Whereas I knew that when I first tested for because I do remember now. I tested. Yes, I did a test for Casino Royale, and I had to do a sort of sexy scene with an actor. My first screen test. No, it wasn't.
Wow.
The landscape one was the first screen test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you recall which section you shot first? Was it the Orson Welles material?
I don't recall. We were around the set for many weeks. It went on for a long time. It's a steady job, turning up and getting ready and hanging about. I don't remember which was first. I think probably the scene with Peter Sellers probably was first.
And did Joseph McGrath direct both of the sections you were working on?
He directed my work with Peter Sellers, yes. And the rest of the time, it was a mystery who was directing it. I mean, there were more directors on that film. I never met them. I just know there was Bob Parrish was on our set at some point. I don't remember who directed me. I do remember the scene with Peter Sellers for sure, because I had to say my lines to Joe McGrath, and Peter Sellers took off for my love scene, sex scene. He left, so I was rather nonplussed by that and a bit angry that he didn't bother to stay.
Yeah.
And it was my first scene when I had to be a little bit, and it would have been nice to have had someone off camera who wasn't just reading the lines like he was reading, a laundry list.
It's not the most encouraging of environments to create for like a young actor who's obviously working on a very big production.
Yes, it was terrifying.
Well, the film Casino Royale has a bit of a history of being a nightmare behind the scenes. And we kind of alluded to that just before, but did you get a sense of that at the time, that there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of stop and start?
No, I really didn't, because I didn't know how really normal films were. And on the first film I done, which was The Knack, the first part I was an extra really, but I did have to do an audition for it. I thought it was a madhouse. I said, this is to be the worst movie in the world. This is a C, B, D. I don't know. It was definitely not on my range. I had no idea what we were doing. We were all dressed the same. The girls were dressed the same. We were lined up. It was freezing cold. There was free food. That was all I really cared about. And I didn't know the actors. And I thought, this is absolute rubbish. When I saw it, I was stunned. So I'd had that experience. Obviously, filmmaking is mad. I'd been up in the north of England shooting Cul-de-sac with Polanski. Once again, a very odd, surrealistic set, place, atmosphere. There was nothing banal about these first experiences. And then I don't know if I'd done Two for the Road before or after, but then we were in the south of France, living in a lovely time, having a lovely time there. The penny hadn't really fully that this was a serious business. And
well, of course, you get your triumphant reveal with your scene with Peter Sellers as Miss Goodthighs. So maybe just tell us a little about working with Peter Sellers. There's obviously stories about that behind the scenes as well, but what was sort of your experience with Peter?
Well, my experience with Peter was not very good. Prior to me getting the part, I had gone to Mr. Feldman. He was one of the producers. I remember his first name. He was a big boss of that film, Charles Feldman.
Mm-hmm.
I had been asked to come and join Mr. Feldman and some people at his flat in central London. And I turned up looking sort of fairly pretty kind of thing. I had a sort of sexy dress on, a bit short, but anyway, I walked into the room and there was David Niven and Peter Sellers, and who else was there? Somebody else was there. Anyway, the sofa, which was in the middle of the room, was full. They were sitting, and I thought, well, where am I going to sit? So there was a little, what they call a puff, a little round kind of thing you can sit on. So I sat down on it, and the springs were definitely not holding me up. So I sat down on it, and I fell backwards, and I was mortified. So now I'm half on the floor, and my legs are up by my knees. And there I'm wearing this dress, which was a little bit sexy. And David Niven very sweetly put his arm outside the sofa and sort of tried to pull me up from the puff so I could try and get my balance in this awful little horrible little poof. And I had to continue sitting there, and they had this, there was a lot of talking going on about this. And somehow, I don't know how it happened, but Peter Sellers was talking about accents. And he was talking about accents in different parts of England or the world, or no, mainly England. And I made the mistake of saying to him, well, I think I said to him, actually, that one's quite right. It was an Oxfordshire accent.
Mm-hmm.
He looked at me a bit like, I beg your pardon, you whippersnapper. And anyway, I realized that I should have kept quiet, but I didn't agree with what he'd said. And I learned the lesson is to keep quiet. Anyway, that meeting went away. And I always wondered if he kind of held it against me, because he really wasn't very nice with me. And in fact, when I arrived, you've seen the film, I presume, 10 times in order to be able to do this interview. When I walked in with my bottle of champagne, he was supposed to turn towards me, and I had to say, Mr. Bond, whatever. And he fired the gun. And actually, it wasn't a full load of what do you call them?
A blank.
A blank. Yes, it was whatever it was, but it didn't. But it did produce little blood spots all over my face. And of course, I dropped the champagne bottle, and hell of a fright. And this was early on in our meeting, so we hadn't done the part on the bed yet. And so we did it again, and saying, well, why did he do that? But anyway, I'd been told that he was recovering from he had been quite an ill man, and I certainly want to hold a grudge. So we'll do it again. Golly, what a thing! How lucky I am not to have been blinded, by that silly accident. And we went on with the thing, and then we got eventually to the scene on the bed. I was supposed to put the pill in the glass, and I had to say to him, I think, I can't remember what I had to say. He said, like, if I'm not back in a minute, start without me. That was the line, if I remember.
Yep.
And yes. So I had to do the scene with Joe McGrath, and he didn't come back. Oh, golly, this is not friendly, And of course, I learned my lesson there. I learned that you've got to be there for the actor. No messing about. I'm there. Actually, I need actors to be there. So I learned that. Definitely makes a difference in reading it with an assistant director. Nothing against them, but just they don't read it the way they would. So that was my sort of little moment of uncomfortableness.
I would love to know, when this happens, like, what's the reaction of, the director and everyone around?
In which bit of it? Which bit of it?
With the gun incident, because that just sounds like something that would be very alarming.
I don't know what their reaction was. I just knew my own reaction. And I just was a bit shaken by it. And I don't really know what to say, because I'm sure they were, like, horrified.
I guess, more so, like, did they kind of, like, jump in to kind of, like, assist you? Like, was there...
Well, there was nothing to do. It was just, look at my face. See, there were little, all the little tiny blood spots, and, put some makeup on and try, and then we went on again. But,
I'd say it's testament to you for rolling with the punch so much and getting on with the scene. Because if that was the first time you were actually sharing the camera with Peter, that's... It
wasn't. Yeah, well, you have to roll. You've got to be a good sport in this thing. Fast, generally. I've had over the years, I've had various things that were a little bit dangerous, and got through them. You just sort of, you make sure that you obviously gradually, when these things happen, you try and check that everything is being noted and that you are in line with the stunt people and so on.
Now, I'm curious. There's a bit of a glaring omission in the film. I actually watched it in the cinema, not just the other day here in London. So I saw it on the big screen. And what jumped out to me is your character is killed by Ursula Andress, but you're never seen again.
Well, what can I say? I have no idea. I never understood the film. I thought it was a very peculiar film.
Few do.
You do, no, and I'm amazed that people are talking about it still. I get quite a lot of people who write to me about that role in Casino Royale.
It's one of the most coherent parts of the film, so that's appreciated. But was there ever any plan to film a death scene or further footage with you, or was, as far as you're aware, that was it?
So in, out, I think. But I wasn't party to any discussions about script or anything. One isn't in the beginning. You don't get up. Nobody asks your opinion. I remember my only participation was that they loaded me up with makeup. The first part I remember, and I remember, no way I'm going to go on screen with this makeup. I was not used to wearing a lot of makeup. I really didn't want to be tarted up completely. I went into the bathroom and sort of wiped a considerable amount of makeup off my face, and then went back. And I was lucky nobody said anything, but thought I was going to be scolded heavily.
I'm really curious. There was so much issues in terms of, rewrites on the set and multiple directors. When you're doing like your big scene there with Peter Sellers, was like all the dialogue locked down, or was there like a lot of rewrites going on and handing you new pages? Or
No, it was locked down. But I don't remember anything other than that doing it. Except I did expect him to be there.
Well, you mentioned just before, but are you surprised with the legacy of this film? I mean, it's been remade since, I suppose, in a way,
yes,
by Daniel Craig. But as you say, you still get contact about it now, and we're talking about it right now about this film in 2022. Yes. So, does that surprise you at all?
No, not really. I mean, there's people who love the Bond films, and this was a spoof. So, different generations discover things. Things go on and on. Things don't usually fade completely out of existence. I've noticed relative to the films I've done. Somebody's seen something, wants to know something.
I had just a question about the scenes you do where you appear in the Orson Welles section. If you had just any memories of Orson Welles during the shooting of that sequence.
Oh, yes, I have a lot of memories of it. Mainly, we would all be gathered together in the early part of the day for makeup. And Orson was always looking for a good breakfast. I remember him, because he left, we didn't travel. He was staying in central London, and I was staying in central London. And he asked me, should I know a place for a good breakfast early in the morning, and I really didn't. But I only knew a place called the Golden Egg, which was and I remember telling him about the egg, and I don't know if he went there, but he was a very large man, and he liked to eat. So I thought it was important. And he seemed quite kind. I thought he was lonely. I felt he was lonely and a bit not very happy. I didn't feel. I mean, he used to sit off on the set, when we were in the big room with all the action, with the gambling tables and all that sort of stuff. He would be in a corner. He was working on his next project. It's always, you could tell that he was doing Casino Royale because he wanted to make money and he wanted to put his film together. Predominantly, that was why he was there. But when he had to get up and do his bit, he was very present.
Interestingly, then, if you're looking at moving on from Casino Royale, one question I actually got from one of our listeners on Twitter, and credit to @Kid Creole for the brilliant question. Post Casino Royale, obviously the Bond films are still going now. But were you ever approached by Eon to do another Bond film, perhaps an official one, in air quotes?
No, not that I know of.
I could have seen you in many films. That would have been great.
Well, I can't say that I was dying to be in one. After that first one, I thought, well, gosh, I don't know about these films. I was very happy to watch other people in them. And no, it was not an aspiration.
That's fair enough. And the only other question I had was, and again, we kind of brushed on this one earlier. Is there a lesson you took away? Obviously, this was very early in your career, and you've gone on to do great, great things. Is there a lesson you took from working on that set to films you worked on afterwards?
Totally, yes. It's be there for the actor, the other actor. Don't be sent home early and then not be there for the actor. And that happens quite a lot because of reasons of schedule. They trump them, say, they're running a bit late. Everybody's pushed for time. The scene that you've been waiting to do all day long, and you get to do at the end of the day, and the other actor's been sent home because they've got an early call in the morning. It's not very pleasant. That can happen. And in reverse, sometimes I'm told I can go, and I say, no, I'm not going. We haven't done the scene yet. I'm going to be there for the actor. Some actors like to work without a person on set, but I don't. I need the other actor. It changes the performance. But depends on what style of actor but I learned that. And in fact, on my first, when I was working on the cul-de-sac with Roman Polanski, I didn't know the terminology of things. You know, it was really green, really green. And I used to hear the first assistant director saying, now we're going to do lines off. I said, why is he talking Russian? What? Why does he keep saying that? And I would stand there and I had no idea what to do. And I didn't dare say that I didn't know what lines off was. And it took a long time. Come on, Jackie, get moving. Say your lines off. And I went, oh, lines off. I thought, a really silly mistake. But it embarrassed me terribly. And there were other things like that. Because nobody says, they call it, I don't know what other people call it, but it's got different names. So if you don't know.
Like the language of films.
Yes, the language of films. Yeah.
Well, we are a spy movie podcast, and we often talk about James Bond stuff on the show. And I would just love to know, Murder on the Orient Express, if you had any memories of working with Sean Connery.
Yes, I do. I do remember him, of course. Yes, he was extremely, he was very charming. He looked wonderful in his outfit, in his period outfit. He didn't dress well, I would say, himself. And he really didn't care about it, I think. You know, but I remember he had different socks on once, and I saw him at some social event. I remember thinking it was rather funny. But when he was dressed in his outfit, very sexy, very handsome.
It's nice to know I have something in common with Sean Connery.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was going to ask about Airport, a film you did a few years later after Casino Royale. But Cam, did you want to talk about Bullitt?
Well, I actually was watching Bullitt last night, or rewatching Bullitt. Yeah. And one of the things I find so interesting about that movie is how much of it is just told through behavior versus dialogue. And I would just love to know about, finding a character often without any dialogue in a scene. And it all really does hold together. All the actors, that's kind of the approach. But yeah, I'd love to know about that.
Well, I don't know what to add to that. If you got that, I wasn't aware of that. I mean, obviously, words are just part of filming.
Mm-hmm.
In the moment is really what's essential, because and if they pick up stuff that's got some subtext to it visually, that's very important. It's not really about the lines, is it?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you could liken that back to Casino Royale. Your entrance barely has any words, but the presence on screen, that's one of the standing visuals that you still keep in your mind is you appearing with the bottle of champagne. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So I don't really know how to answer your question.
Sure. Okay. Well, I mean, it's a very just unbelievably well-made movie. Technically, what was Peter Yates's, process of putting together a scene and directing you through it?
He was lovely. He was a very nice man. He was a man of distinction. He had class. He was civilized. Treated me very politely and very nicely, as did Steve, actually. Steve Quinn was very nice too. I had to hang around for weeks because they were shooting in San Francisco and I was in Los Angeles. And I kept thinking, well, they can let me come up soon and I'll be doing something week after week. And I said, this is awful. I was just awful waiting. At least I was at home. And then he said, Peter Yates said, I want you to come up to San Francisco and I want you to pretend, learn to live in San Francisco. So they had a flat for me to come up to. There wasn't enough flat, and I stayed there, going from one foot to the other and back, and occasionally going on set to say hello and everything. And I had no idea how to do what he meant. I didn't know about, becoming a person who lives in San Francisco in terms of that as the actor. I mean, no one who knows how to incorporate all those things that make it seem authentic. So I did a few up and downs, and still I wasn't shooting. I thought I can cut out of this. But he was always very nice, very nice. And we used to go, I would join them. I would go with he and Bob Royer, who was the co-producer with Steve McQueen. and we would all go and eat in different restaurants, and we'd have another nice meal. And Steve would always want to not be seen. He was always very furtive and trying to escape anybody. He was an enormous star at the time, and he didn't really want to be bothered. I think he was always turn his back to the door and never sort of show off at all. Get on, he'd come on his bike, leave on his bike, and boom, he was out, he was gone. And Peter was just very wonderful, as he was on a film. I did another film with him called The Deep.
Yeah.
He had a bright yellow canary suit, bodysuit on, and he was incredibly lovely on underwater, sitting on a rock, correcting.
Oh, The Deep was a big deal for me because I'd read the novel and then saw the film. And so I had a fair amount of experience with The Deep. And it's a movie that I very much appreciated. And I would just love to know, kind of, as we jumped over there, just any memories you had of working with Robert Shaw,
Oh, yes.
Another actor we've talked a lot about, and I think we're both huge admirers of.
You both are? Or
Absolutely.
you and I, you mean?
All three of us, maybe. Yeah.
All three of us, maybe. Oh, I adored Robert Shaw. He made me laugh. He was so funny and so childlike. I met him on a film which I did with John Voight. What was it called? It was in Switzerland. Anyway, I met him on that, and Robert liked to tipple a little bit, definitely liked his own drink. And he asked me if I'd come and drink with him, and I thought, well, I think so, but I'll go with him because I liked him and he made me laugh. He would tell these silly sort of fart jokes and stuff like that, which totally cracked me up. Absolutely, I have a very low sense of humor, very easy sense of humor, and we just would giggle, just stupid stuff. And then when I did the Deep, well, he and Nick became fast friends, and I was like the Bullitt. I was the person who you could tease. They would gang up on me. They would gang up on me a lot, and underwater particularly. They would do pranks and stuff, so I had to survive. I had to be. And then at one point, Robert started. He didn't drink, and he was just perfect. And at some point, he went off, and it got very difficult. He was it was dangerous for him, but he had to be followed underwater because he would just do really silly things. And what was protective of him, loved him dearly. He and Nick were tough on me, but once again, you got to go with the flow. Be a good sport. As long as I didn't drown, I was okay.
I was going to ask you, there's so much underwater stuff. Was that, a concern for you signing on? Was it challenging to shoot?
Totally concerning. I was a very average swimmer. I had a big fear of water. And when they taught me into doing the film, they said, well, you won't have to do much. We'll have little, you won't have to do, the old close up and stuff. Well, I wasn't convinced, but Peter Goober convinced me to do the film. And he said, this man called Al Giddings will teach you how to swim, how to dive, and you'll be always surrounded and everything, and people will be around and everything. And Al Giddings came to my house, and I have a swimming pool. He said, we'll start in the swimming pool. And he said, I just want you to know that you can drown in 3 feet of water. Be very aware that things can go wrong very quickly. But with Al Giddings there, then we went into the ocean, and I went into like 90 feet, it was a big deal. It was a big deal. And then I started, the person who they had double me, we didn't look at all alike. And so I started to have to do a great deal of it. And that was it. And, once you're in, you don't want to be a bad sport. You want to be game. You want to be well liked, and you don't want to cause a harumph all the time. So you just do a bit more than you probably should do. Accidents happen.
You don't want to rock the boat.
No, you don't want to. And I think, generally that's been my attitude in my career. It's just I don't want to hear my voice whining, And I think you have to discuss a lot of stuff before you do a project. hopefully you can get your fears out of the way with the director so that you talk about it and you don't have to keep whining, because directors don't have time to think about all the little details. They've got enough to deal with. Massive job being the director. They want to cover everything. And so I'm a bit that way in my life. I try and take care of things myself. I don't like call my agent unless I'm really desperate. And that's only happened a couple of times.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Agents, we have some breaking intel.
That's right. Independent podcasting is not cheap. Equipment, hosting, research, these all add up, and we don't have Vesper Lind to bail us out.
And also, we don't want to run ads on the show. Leave the shopping to Harry Palmer, we say. And this is a big reason we created the SpyHards Patreon.
So we're here to ask for your help. Please consider joining the Patreon. You'll not only be gaining access to our exclusive lineup of reviews and film commentaries, but also helping support the show. We're currently saving to upgrade our sound equipment to meet IMF standards and give you an even better listening experience.
With a wide range of flexible options and an ever-growing catalogue to dive into, become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards, or you can find a link in the show notes below. Now, Cam, resume the spy jinx. Now, when I was preparing for this chat with yourself, I watched Casino Royale, but I chose another film out of your filmography I hadn't seen, which was Airport. And one of the reasons I chose it, I read that it was a very good performance from you, and I completely agree. There's some very sensitive stuff you talk about there. When your character becomes pregnant and you choose to keep the baby, and it's the Dean Martin's character's married, and there's a whole thing there. But firstly, my question to you: I was blown away by the film, but what was it like working with Dean Martin? Because he's a previous spy.
That was so much fun. So much fun. He loved to make people laugh. He loved to entertain. He would bend over backwards to make people laugh. His number was very, it's very, he liked being drunk. He liked singing. He was just very, very fun. And there was a completely different set when he was on the set, when Burt Lancaster was on the set. When Dean was there, everyone was happy. Everyone was joking. He had a golf club, swinging his golf club, glass of apple juice, everyone laughed. With Burt, it was very serious, silent film.
And when you took on the role in Airport, now there is, as I say, there's quite sensitive material in the sense of you speak of perhaps an abortion at one point. There's quite tough topics to tackle. And this is only 3 years after doing Casino Royale. You've been acting for about 5 years at that point. So I would imagine quite the challenge. How did you tackle that? Head on?
Yeah, it was. The challenge is usually the same. It's just, you get over your fear and you could do it. The challenge was getting the costume right.
Oh.
It was incredibly long process of finding getting the uniform, so that the producer Russ, what's his name? Russ, gosh, I've forgotten his name. He was very finicky about the costume. I mean, no, it wasn't bright, it wasn't tight enough, it wasn't loose enough, it wasn't sexy enough, it wasn't this, it wasn't, and I think I had about 11 fittings. So that's where I met the famous Edith Head, who was the style-oriented madame, and we finally got the costume either way. I can't believe I've forgotten the name of the producer. He was very nice, but anyway.
Well, there's one scene in particular that jumped out to me where you and Dean Martin are sitting in the plane before takeoff, and you're discussing. You told him that you're pregnant in that scene, and what I thought going into Airport that it would just be a disaster flick. There'd be explosions, and I did get an explosion, but I was not prepared for those personal scenes, and I think that's what really holds up the film. So, what was just that scene like?
I haven't seen it, so I have no idea. Can't remember. Can't remember. My goodness. I know that my first scene with Dean, it was in the mid-morning, and I had to arrive. And they're shooting, and I think somebody was packing a suitcase. I guess I was packing a suitcase.
Yes, you were in your house.
Yes. Was it in my house?
Mm.
And the director said, okay, now we want Jacqueline come and kiss Dean, and then you pull away. I mean, I had hardly met him. And now, I mean, I'm got to kiss him. And it was like a first shot. Ban away Dean Martin. I mean, suddenly got to kiss him. I was really know quite how to take it. And when I pulled away, because that was what I had to do, I had to sort of push him off.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of saying what was the character's name? I can't remember. Whatever it was, I didn't say it. And I said, "Oh, Dean," like it was him, rather not the character, right? And I went bright red, and all the crew were laughing, and everybody was joking with, and I was embarrassed to have used his name rather than the character's name, and that was it. But I mean, when you're rather inexperienced, these things can be a bit awkward. Couldn't have been nice. This couldn't have been nicer. I mean, it really was nice.
The only other question that jumped out to me with the airport is I was genuinely surprised where the chap actually blows up the suitcase and the plane explodes, and your character is caught in the explosion. Now, you then are being treated by a doctor for the rest of the film. But were you part of the stunt of them exploding the compartment, or was it a stunt double the whole time, or did you get involved with that?
Well, I don't know. I was on the floor, if I remember right. And when I hate telling how movies are done because it just breaks all magic, I was involved in it because I had to be seen, but I wasn't actually in the explosion. But it's put together. I'm there. Someone pulling him. I was sort of lying on the floor, and then somebody's pulling my legs actually to create the thing of the suction of the air going out of the plane. Dropping in we're dropping in, what do you call it? Losing pressure.
Right. Yeah. In altitude. Yeah.
I remember thinking how hilarious it was. I couldn't imagine how they were going to do this, but when they did it, when they had all the things lift and swoosh through the plane, that was pretty amazing. Of course, now they'd probably have to do it. It would be done better. Special effects would be done different now. But what it did do is I was extremely nervous on my next flight, knowing that this could happen as a air stewardess. Miss Bisset, we saw an airport. Oh my God. Well, are you all right?
Anyone walking into a toilet cubicle you get worried about?
What?
Anyone walking into one of the toilets in the plane, you start to get a bit sweaty, just in case something happens.
No, we don't go there.
Yeah. Well, I think before we let you go and bid our farewells, we have one question we tend to ask all of our guests. What is your favorite spy film, personally?
I'm not aware particularly of. I remember the one that The Man Who Knew Too Much. There was a movie when I was young that I saw, which took place in a kind of Moroccan atmosphere, souks and stuff like that, if I remember right. Who was in it? I don't think it was Jimmy. I think it might have been Doris Day in it. Could it have been Doris Day in a spy film?
There is The Man Who Knew Too Much, which
The Man Who Knew Too Much. It was a good-looking man in it.
Because the Doris Day one is paired with Jimmy Stewart, the Hitchcock movie. That's what at least.
No, I didn't. That's not that. No, that isn't. No? This one was more a spy. I like spy movies actually. I do like them a lot. I can't remember the names of them. I've got a terrible memory for things I see, and for books too. I've read a lot of books, and then I didn't know what I'd read, but just kept reading. And then when I became an actor, I was like, well, have you any roles you'd like to play? And I said, well, they surely are, but I don't know the names of the books that I've paid attention to. So I can't give you an answer. I think The Man Who Knew Too Much was one of an early one.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Tell me some other names maybe you can jog my memory.
Well, if we're looking at Hitchcock, we've got all the way back to things like Notorious, North by Northwest, 39 Steps, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think I saw some of those. but I didn't fixate on one particular one.
It's a good era, to be fair, for spy films.
Hitchcock was I don't know, not really spy films, are they? They're sort of
We count them as spy films.
it was spy films. So I can't really give you an answer, proper answer.
That's okay. That's okay.
My mind is just blank.
No, that's fine. Well, I will try and change the angle of the question. Is there a favorite Bond film then? Is there one that you've caught since, perhaps not Casino Royale, but another one you've caught over the years that you enjoyed?
Well, the one I liked, this last one I wasn't particularly keen on. There was one, I think it's the one before this last one, I think it is. Judi Dench was in it.
Skyfall.
I think I like Skyfall particularly.
Terrific film. Very good choice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know what else to say, Jacqueline. You've been absolutely a star. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Casino Royale. Is there anything you're working on at the moment you'd like to mention?
I'm promoting something. I did a wonderful role in a film called Lauren and Rose, which is kind of like a two-parter.
Mm-hmm.
There are other people in it, but it's basically a conversation between an actress who's had a very peculiar life, good life and a bad life. She's been an unreliable personnage, and a young film director who she wants to work with, and they meet in a restaurant and talk. And it leads it to a very, very long and very deep conversation and friendship. And it was a wonderful experience, absolutely wonderful. I just took it to the Santa Barbara Film Festival, and now I'm going to go to the Sonora Film Festival with it, and then we're going to go to what's Saratoga, Sausalito? No, what's it called? There's a film festival there. Anyway, so that's what I'm doing at the moment, and one of the best roles of my life. I made the most incredible script.
Fantastic. Has that got distribution? Will it be coming out in the cinemas?
No, we haven't got distribution yet. We've just come out of COVID a bit, so now we're actually going to this film festival. Is not on Zoom. We're actually going there, be there. So this is a whole 2 years have been lost in film for this film. It was just very sad not to have it out. But anyway, now it's getting good reaction.
Good. Well, all I can say is then thank you, Jacqueline, for taking the time to talk to us today.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. Miss Goodthighs herself has graced the podcast. I think it's another Bond girl we've added to our collection of interviews, and we learned a lot about Casino Royale.
Yeah, and this was really just fascinating to get that sort of insight into a movie that there's not a lot of opportunities for us to talk to the major players with this movie anymore, and in particular, this movie is fascinating to hear about, given just the production was such a disaster across the board, where you had multiple directors and writers and all that sort of thing. And so to have someone give their firsthand account about a very, very memorable sequence in the film was a real, just absolute pleasure.
Yeah, Jacqueline was very gracious with her time. And, as we said in the review earlier in the week, there's not many films we're going to tackle on this show that had basically 6 directors and numerous writers, producers, and, this film has 5 or 6 James Bonds, 8 or so if you count the animals. So just to have a little perspective of on set, I think is absolutely priceless. And, we learned things like, some may know some of the stories, of course, but the accident on set where Peter Sellers shot the gun and the blank fired at Jacqueline. She got hit in the face by the blank, and given current events happened recently in Hollywood, it's a very dangerous thing to do and could have fatal results, as we've recently learnt. And luckily that wasn't the case on Casino Royale. We know Peter Sellers had some demons that he was dealing with at the time, and but just to hear her attitude towards it and the way she dealt with it very professionally on set is quite the marvel.
Yeah, you're right. I just kept thinking of those recent events that were swirling around, the Alec Baldwin incident on that film Rust. And I'm like, this was a 2021 production that happens on, which I would imagine probably has a little stricter safety protocols than a film in the 60s. And just given how scary an incident this was, it just definitely kind of gives you those those shivers of thinking about the modern day, as you said. But just the professionalism I thought was just unbelievable. And to hear her talk about working her way through a scene that I think would be quite difficult when you get off really on a terrible foot with an actor, with Peter Sellers behaving the way he did. You have to be playful. This is a comedy. It has to have a lightness of tone. There's, like a romance scene. To be able to pull all that off, given those circumstances, just a real credit to her professionalism.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a rapport between her and James Bond in that scene. And it turns out that most of that scene she shot by herself, talking to one of the ADs. And this is, as we said, her third or fourth credit on IMDb. She's a burgeoning actor at this point and doesn't have the reps to necessarily deal with it, but you can't see that on the screen.
No, like the scene is actually one of the more memorable scenes for me in the film. Like I always remember that character, and it's because of just, that's like 2 minutes, 3 minutes of screen time, but it really does pop on screen.
Are you telling me the flying roulette wheels don't stick in your head?
Well, of course. I mean, only when I sleep, though. That's what I think of as I'm, nodding off.
I often go to Piccadilly Circus and hope that the alien spaceship will land and abduct everyone. That's a James Bond film, folks. But also to learn about, a lot of people forget that she was also in the scenes with Orson Welles earlier on in the film, part of the sort of harem of assassins, and just talking about working with Orson Welles and how warm he was. These are the stories that I like to get on the show, because Orson Welles isn't with us anymore, and most of the people that have worked with Orson Welles also aren't with us anymore. So just to have the opportunity to speak to her about that, and just briefly hear that she had a nice time working with him is really lovely to hear.
And he was such a driven artist, where she's talking about how he was always kind of working on his next projects and probably took this one to fund that. But nonetheless, even if he was just taking, basically a paycheck on this movie to fund something that's more of a passion project, he is incredibly memorable in this movie as well, like with his whole magic act at the, casino table. So it was just a real joy to hear her talk about more of the individual that she was working with in those scenes.
Just to sort of wrap up our thoughts on the Casino Royale of it all, it's a daunting task to be called in to do a Bond film. Yeah, we spoke with Rachel Grant last year about her appearance in Die Another Day, but she said that nothing but professional. She was taken care of the entire time. Very quick turnaround, but she was always taken care of. And this seems like it was a different atmosphere, a different environment for any actor that Jacqueline obviously dealt with grace. And you can't see any of those struggles on the screen. I mean, you can see the plot struggling on the screen, but that's not her fault.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing. Casino Royale, say what you will about it in terms of plot and story, but in terms of individual performances, it's a lot of like little kind of moments of inspiration going on throughout, and she's a pretty good example of that.
I always say David Niven's acting of picking up cannonballs is perhaps the height of acting. They should be showing that in all acting schools. The only other thing I had as a note I wanted to bring up about the interview is it was nice to know I have a connection with Sean Connery, because when he's not playing James Bond, and this is what we're talking about Murder on the Orient Express that she starred in with Sean Connery, when he's not wearing his tuxedos and drinking his martinis, he's probably was walking around in jogging bottoms. And so it's nice to know that that Sir Sean and I had something in common.
Yes, I mean, I was really excited to hear her talk about some of these icons that we discuss on the show, whether it was Connery or also Robert Shaw, who obviously in The Deep, obviously in From Russia with Love, but Jaws is a huge deal for me. So any sort of stories I can get just in terms of people who've worked with Robert Shaw talking about experiences they had with him is just so fascinating for me. And I loved hearing her accounts on that.
Absolutely, and of course, we briefly spoke about Airport as well from 1970, and she starred opposite Dean Martin, who was, of course, the head of the Matt Helm films from the 60s, so he was also a notable spy that we haven't got to on the show yet, but I'm looking forward to tackling Matt Helm down the road. Cam, before we wrap it up and say goodbye, is there any sort of final notes you have on the interview you wanted to bring up?
Yeah, just really exciting to hear about Bullitt, a movie that I think is very cool, and has kind of been brought up again in the public consciousness because of The Batman, which borrows some elements from Bullitt. And it is just the epitome of like the cool 60s film and just technically unbelievable. The direction by Peter Yates is fantastic. So that's one worth checking out if you haven't seen it. And I will be very interested to see how Spielberg updates that material with the upcoming Bullitt film he's working on.
Absolutely. And yeah, we briefly spoke about the film that she's currently touring around at film festivals, Lauren and Rose, directed by Russell Brown. And hopefully we'll be seeing that in theaters in the coming years. She was very passionate about, very excited. So it should be a hell of a time.
Yeah, and best of luck to her that it picks up distribution and gets some attention because, nowadays there's so many outlets with all of the streaming services as well as theaters. So hopefully it is something that we are able to see and can pass on to our listeners when it's available.
Absolutely. So, Cam, that concludes our chat about Casino Royale 67. I think we've used all of our LSD by this point to get through it. I'm still coming down from that high.
Don't ever come down from that Casino Royale high, Scott.
I'm up in that spaceship, man. Don't you worry about it. And also, I've got 007 Dog with me.
Oh, perfect.
But why don't we let the guys know what we're doing next week?
Yes, we are tackling 2009's Burn After Reading. This is another star-studded film, much like in some ways Casino Royale, but this is a Coen Brothers film, and I'm really interested to dive back into this one. This was their follow-up to No Country for Old Men, so that's very notable as well.
Yeah, I actually watched this one a few months ago, funnily enough, before we decided to do it for the show, and I think that's when I decided it was quite spy adjacent, and I wanted to talk about it. So it's actually interesting that I'm bringing a prestige film to the list for once.
That's right. It had to happen eventually.
I'm growing, Cam. Look at me grow. Wait, no, that's just the LSD, and my hand's getting bigger.
You can find the next Condor Man or trench coat a little bit further down the road.
I don't want to find another trench coat. I gave it in at Goodwill.
That's right.
Well, there you go, folks. Thank you for checking out our coverage for Casino Royale 67. And your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to watch Burn After Reading and join us next week. Do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, excuse me, are you Richard Burton?
No, I'm Peter O'Toole.
Barbican Station explores the spy world of Slough House and the Slow Horses created by author Mick Herron. Find it online at slough.house or in your favorite podcast app under Barbican Station.